Ridley Scott's uncompromising The Last Duel is only the latest in a short line of films to show the abject monstrosity of the 100 Years' War. A cataclysmic absurdity, from its notation in history books to its astronomical death toll. Millions gone, the whole of Europe plunged into darkness, and for what? When war was all men had to measure themselves, was life better? Would a few more centuries of this nightmare make men any more sturdy of character? Was it worth it to fight at all? Was this all that life had to offer? Perhaps it's simply that it's difficult to want to look at the injustice that defines every aspect of life during this period. Perhaps the approaches adopted by the directors who deigned to tackle it were too reserved. Both John Huston and Bertrand Tavernier had tried to adopt a Bruegelian observational quality, to simply show without judgment the terrifying ordinariness of life during the 100 Years' War, as peasants, as royalty, as everyone suffered. Huston's film, A Walk with Love and Death, was one of his many notorious failures. As the scion of a great Hollywood actor, he was allowed more than his fair share of second chances for his trespasses, which included vehicular manslaughter and domestic abuse. Everyone agreed to just let him be. Hollywood has always watched out for its own. In the film that would help alienate him from his daughter until the last few years of his life, A Walk with Love and Death, based on the book by Hans Königsberger, is one of his most accomplished films. Formally and narratively adopting a tone much like the medieval poems of bravery it seeks to subvert. Huston loved to tackle countercultural texts, believing he could make great cinema from great literature by applying a studied painterly eye to the images that contain the great reams of unruly text. He succeeded as often as he failed, which is no mean feat when you consider what he attempted to convert. The film is broadly about the rich and the poor being subject to chaos, the only true law, and that freedom from one's station was both the only chance anyone had of happiness, and yet the only way possible to achieve it might just be death.
And one single dying rose to pluck the laurel sage.
Eat, my boy. Eat. Take it from an old soldier. Fill your belly every chance you get. Gorge yourself. Throw up if you have to and start again. There may never be a next time.
Don't mind my father, Herr Foy. He has the manners of a bear.
They're battlefield manners.
My father used to tell me stories, Uncle, about your deeds in battle.
Our deeds, Claudia. We upheld and defended each other, standing and fighting back to back. I mourn your father. He was my loyal comrade in days when nothing was so important as loyalty to man and God. Now God has turned his face away from this world and its order is broken down.
But it will be restored.
I'm afraid not. Once, you see, every man had his task, every task its reason and its reward. The peasant fed us, the priest prayed for our salvation, the nobleman defended all. Now, we, the nobles, your people, Claudia, and mine, who are meant to be shepherds, have become wolves. Far from defending the peasant, we prey upon him. Who can blame those meek men who have fed us from the beginning of time for rising against us?
Are you condoning my father's murder, Uncle?
It may sound harsh, but I believe right is on the side of the peasant.
Well, sir, why don't you join them?
I have. I've resigned my rank, and I'm going to lead one of their armies.
Bertrand Tavernier took the miserable lost paradise of medieval France as his setting for 1987's Beatrice, in which a young Julie Delpy waits patiently for the return of her soldiering father from one of the endless campaigns during the 100-Year War. He returns an inhuman sadist, a reptile hell-bent on ruining the complacency he spies in every bedroom and hall of his castle. He nearly drives his son to suicide in a quest to make him a less complacent, more masculine creature like himself.
Terrasse, déshabillez-le. J'ai dit gare! Allez! Réjouissez-vous du corps de mon fils! Il est encore tout chaud de sa course! Imaginez qu'il est pauvre! Ça vous rendra la tâche plus facile.
And his hatred for his daughter's affection turns to lust.
Béatrice de Cortemare, acceptez-vous de prendre pour époux? Votre père est seigneur François de Cortemare.
Beatrice is typical Tavernier in its withdrawn gaze, its atypical score by bassist Ron Carter, its look at the vicissitudes of historical movements and war. Tavernier spent much of his career begging for accountability on behalf of the war dead of Europe. He made many movies about the wars in the 20th century, and by making Beatrice, he linked their senseless violence, the violence of all men. We rob children of their fathers on the battlefield and off, when we make men into soldiers for a state who would happily see us, one more corpse. Both Houston and Tavernier had lived through World War II, one as an infant observer, the other as a visiting soldier. They had seen firsthand what it had done to people, friend and family. And they demanded explanations. Where they'd lived without the bullet wounds and psychological toll, they saw it on everyone in reach, and wanted to know, wanted everyone in power to ask themselves, was all of this pain worth it?
My master said, the very roots of earth shall rise up to slay, and there shall be naught but death and counter-death.
Who is this, master?
You shall meet him.
When none came, they answered themselves in these psychologically spare character studies.
Arnaud. Ma mère a pourri le sang des Cortemare. Le diable s'en abreuve. Et mon fils hurle de terreur au sortir de la nuit.
It's a hard proposition to get audiences, especially Americans, for whom the sanctity of a certain kind of violence is such an intrinsic part of life, to sit still for a hard look at the nature of men in war, men whose hearts are never fully bereft of the savagery needed to survive there.
dit pour partir à la guerre. Je le savais bien, mon amour. Je le savais bien. Ton beau visage.
The 100 Years' War, like any war will become if it has not yet, is a derangement in our history books. The screams of the dead only echoes on the breezes impotently scraping the walls of long-abandoned battlements and cold stone passages, the glories for which so many went off to kill and be killed, as insignificant as the blood-slicked grass where their enemies fell. No king who once commanded the great armies of Europe still lives. No war fought in his name saved him from eternity. No tribute ever spared a man from his appointment with death. And no soldier ever earned a second more of life than any of us.
Mon Seigneur Dieu, je vous hais.